Welcome to MATCH B2B Insights. I'm Brenda, joined today by Fluman, founder of MATCH B2B, and Dan Mercer, our B2B CFO voice. And we are starting today with a reality check that might make some of our listeners a bit uncomfortable. Benny, you work with small and mid-sized B2B companies looking to scale globally. And you've noticed a pattern that has very little to do with market size or product quality.
It is a silent, continuous drain, Brenda. Most small international B2B companies have no idea how much revenue they are losing inside their own commercial system. They believe their growth ceiling is a lead generation problem or a product feature gap, but the reality is much more systemic. It's a series of microfractures across marketing, SDR outreach, and sales that quietly drain cash.
Let me put some numbers to that. Because from where I sit, cash doesn't lie. When you look at fully loaded CAC, you aren't just paying for software licenses or SDR salaries. You are paying for the time your highly paid sales executives spend chasing dead ends. If your team is spending hours on phone calls with people who don't have the budget, the authority, or even the basic need, your commercial engine is actively burning cash. Pipeline is a story, but cash is the ending.
And from the international marketing side, the waste usually starts long before that first call. Companies decide they want to break into Western Europe or North America, and they launch these broad, generic outbound campaigns. They treat a prospect in Munich exactly like a prospect in Boston, using the same translated copy. They ignore local buying signals and localized pain points, which means their messages are immediately deleted. It's an incredibly expensive way to get ignored.
Exactly, Brenda. And this is why we have to talk about what we call the leak test. If you want to know if this is happening in your business right now, audit your last 50 generated leads. Ask yourself 5 simple questions about each one. Why this specific company? Why this specific person? Why right now? What real-world business signal triggered our outreach? And what is the documented next step? If your team cannot answer those 5 questions with clear data, you are running on hope, not a commercial system.
Let's walk through the math on that. When I look at commercial efficiency, I look at 5 key columns: channel, fully loaded cost, qualified conversations, validated proposals, and closed-won revenue. And the final critical metric is average sales cycle length. If you map your channels this way, you usually discover that your cheapest lead source actually has the longest sales cycle and the lowest close rate, making it your most expensive source of waste.
That's where the conversation usually shifts to technology, right? Everyone is talking about AI. But most companies are just using it to write slightly faster, slightly more generic emails to add to the noise.
That is the ultimate trap, Brenda. AI is not a copywriter. If you use AI to generate more cold emails, you are just accelerating your path to being marked as spam. Instead, we need to treat AI as a business diagnostic layer. AI's real value is its ability to look at your actual GTM execution and compare it against your stated strategy, showing you exactly where the reality matches the slide deck and where it doesn't.
Right. It's about looking at the digital footprint of your market. For example, AI can analyze raw market data, web footprints, and competitor positioning in a target country. It will tell you that while your slide deck says your ideal customer profile is enterprise logistics companies, the companies actually visiting your site and engaging with your content are mid-market warehouse operators. There is a massive, unaddressed gap between who you think you are targeting and who actually has the pain.
I'm glad you brought up the technology, but I have to play the skeptic here. Every software vendor claims their AI tool will solve all our problems. Walk me through the actual math. How does using AI as a diagnostic layer translate to a shorter sales cycle or a lower fully loaded CAC?
It is about data alignment, Dan. If your AI diagnostic tool shows that your SDRs are reaching out to companies that have zero intent signals or are using incompatible software stacks, You stop the outreach immediately. You save the SDR's time, you save your domain reputation, and you focus only on your high priority accounts, the top tier of accounts that show actual buying triggers. That directly lowers your cost per qualified opportunity.
And we also have to touch on data governance and privacy here, especially when selling internationally. You can't just feed raw prospect data or customer interaction records into public AI models without strict guardrails. Compliance with regulations like GDPR isn't a legal footnote. It is a fundamental part of GTM trust. If your diagnostic layer isn't secure and permissions compliant, your GTM system is exposing you to massive financial and reputational risk.
Let's look at how this plays out in a specific sector. Take industrial manufacturing, especially Israeli companies trying to sell heavy machinery, component parts, or industrial IoT solutions into Europe or North America. Historically, their GTM strategy has been, well, hope as a strategy. They spend thousands of dollars on booths at international trade shows, collect business cards, and then hand them off to regional distributors, hoping something sticks.
And those distributors are often a black box. A manufacturer might sign an agreement with a distributor in Germany, assuming they are actively promoting their product line. But that distributor represents 20 other brands, some of which are direct competitors. The manufacturer has absolutely no visibility into whether the distributor is actually pitching their solution or just letting it sit on a catalog page.
This is exactly where the diagnostic AI comes in. Instead of guessing, you can use AI to scan global import-export databases, distributor websites, local shipping registries, and local supply chain data. The AI can map out who these distributors are actually doing business with, which competitor lines they are actively importing, and where there is a genuine gap in their portfolio that your product can fill. You go from guessing who might be a good partner to knowing exactly who is already moving complementary goods.
Let me break down the cost of that manual process. If you attend a trade show, collect 200 leads, and your sales team takes 3 weeks to clean that data and send a manual follow-up, those leads are already cold. You may be losing a major part of your event ROI before the first serious follow-up even happens.
Now contrast that manufacturing model with medtech. In medtech, you aren't dealing with distributors. You are dealing with clinical stakeholders, hospital procurement boards, and regulatory bodies. The sales cycles are incredibly long, and they require a massive amount of clinical credibility. You can't just blast a hospital administrator with a generic sales pitch.
Right, because in medtech, a lead is not just a lead. You have to separate pure academic or clinical interest from actual commercial buying readiness. A researcher might publish a paper on a specific medical technology, which looks like a great signal, but that hospital might not have the budget or the regulatory approval to buy it for another 3 years. AI can parse these medical journals, clinical trial registries, and grant funding records to tell you who is just researching and who actually has the capital budget to purchase.
And the financial implications of that distinction are massive. In medtech, the upfront cash burn of a multi-year sales cycle can break a small company before they close their first deal. If you misjudge a prospect's commercial readiness and spend 18 months flying clinical specialists out to do product demonstrations for a hospital that cannot buy, your cash burn goes through the roof. You must have data that validates commercial timing, not just clinical interest.
Now, if we look at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, SaaS and cybersecurity, the problem is speed and noise. In SaaS, the market is hyper-saturated. Your prospects are getting hit with 20 automated LinkedIn messages and cold emails a day. The response rates are in sharp decline because the outreach is so loud and uncoordinated.
And the waste in SaaS usually happens when marketing is generating leads through content downloads, and the SDR team is immediately blasting those people with automated demo requests. There is no analysis of whether that person has the technical stack to support the software, or if they just wanted to read the white paper. The AI diagnostic layer here needs to look at intent signals and actual technographic data to tell you if they are actually a fit before you initiate outbound.
But the leak in SaaS doesn't stop at the initial sale. In fact, some of the most dangerous leaks happen post-acquisition. In a subscription model, if your sales team closes a deal by promising features that don't exist, or if the onboarding process is completely disconnected from the GTM data, that customer is going to churn within 90 days. A commercial leak isn't just a lost new deal. It is an existing customer who never expands, never refers, or whose renewal risk goes completely undetected because your customer success signals are isolated from your GTM systems.
This is why we need to move away from isolated campaigns and talk about building a connected commercial system. At Match B2B, we don't believe in quick fix marketing campaigns. We look at this as building infrastructure over a structured 6-month process. You have to connect your data, your intent signals, your content, and your outbound outreach into a single, unified operating system.
Benny, I'll challenge that. A 6-month system sounds expensive. A small company may say, why not just run a fast campaign and see what happens?
Because most companies have already been doing random campaigns for years. The problem is not speed, Dan. The problem is that nothing connects back to learning. If you run a fast campaign and it fails, you don't know if the targeting was wrong, the message was off, or the market wasn't ready. You've spent money, but you haven't built any equity or infrastructure.
And that means your content has to be directly aligned with those buyer pain signals. If your AI diagnostics show that target accounts are actively researching how to comply with a new environmental regulation in Europe, your marketing team shouldn't be writing generic product brochures. They should be producing highly specific content that addresses that exact regulatory challenge, which the sales and SDR teams can then use as a valuable conversational door opener.
From a CFO's perspective, this connected system is the only way to build a resilient business that doesn't rely on constant injections of external capital. When you know exactly what your CAC is, how long your sales cycle takes, and where your pipeline is leaking, you can forecast your cash flow with actual precision. You stop guessing, you stop burning cash on uncoordinated activity, and you start building predictable, sustainable growth.
So for the CEOs and business leaders listening tomorrow morning, I want to leave you with 3 simple questions to ask your team. First, do we know our top target accounts in our expansion market, and why are we reaching out to them right now? Second, is our content actually answering the objections our sales team hears on calls, or is it just talking about our product? And third, how many leads from the last 30 days have absolutely no documented next step in our CRM? If you are selling internationally and want to understand where revenue is leaking inside your marketing, sales, and customer growth process, reach out directly. WhatsApp or call me, Benny Fluman, at 052-420-3043.
That was Match B2B Insights. Thanks for listening.